Oh, hey, it's Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I did one of those Twitter things where you post a whole. What is this? Is this a screed? Does this count as a screed? I don't know. I posted a bunch of a long post, and I decided that this could be how Twitter's most useful. Is post something interesting, like discussion piece wise, on there, because I know for me when I'm making video content, if I see a comic book creator that does this, it makes for a good video. So here I'm using myself as video fodder. There we go. Anyway, so this is actually about production of books, and I've got a lot to say about this. I'm going to try and be snappy about it, though. Before we get to that, though, check out Downcast Gods and Gears crossover fun. Right now, it's on Indiegogo. 2 hours left. It'll be in demand by the time you see this video. And I'd love for this to hit $2,000. We're actually less than $200 away from hitting that. And just a Black Friday sale, we've got Pogs here, trading card set. These wax packs are pretty darn popular. But you can also snag t-shirts. These are from the Downcast campaign. Great t-shirts. And you can get any book that I have in print as well. So check that all out. The link is in the description below. All right. So here's what I said. And I meant what I said. Though I could be wrong. And we're going to go over this. So first, I say, I'm certain I could release an ongoing monthly 20 to 22 page book with the right artist. What I mean by right artist is artist that is fast. Yes, they are out there. Fast artists that do good work that aren't so expensive that it's impossible to even make the book. There are artists out there that can do that. They are a rare breed. But this is comics after all, and that's kind of the basis of what comics started out as. It's quick drawing in order to tell a story. Anyway, I digress. So with the right artist, but it would have to cost $10 an issue, and each issue would have to have a variant cover. I wish the economics worked at $2.99 or even $4.99, but comics are expensive when everyone gets paid fairly. What I mean by that is there are people that don't get paid fairly to make comics, and I think that's actually most comic book creators far and wide. Most people, it's a passion project. Even people that work for big publishers, I think most are doing it because they love doing it, not because it pays even well enough for it to justify the time they spend on it. Okay, so continuing on here. Could this model work today? As a reader, I want it. I do. When I heard, who's saying it? I don't know. When I heard about monthly books coming out and a subscription model that would cost $10 a book, I wanted it. As a reader, I wanted it because I want to follow a comic book series. Personally, I don't think I would mind spending $10 an issue if it was some new content I'm excited about. That's as a reader. But as a creator, when I continued on here, as a creator and producer, which gets overlooked often, it's not about creating, it's about producing it. It's about financing it. It's about being the guy that takes the risk if things go wrong. I have some apprehension. One factor is having enough capital to get a 3-issue head start. A 3-issue head start to me is probably the bare minimum. Because if you're really going to commit to a monthly book, you can't be late. You have to be on time. The whole benefit of having a series like that is that getting a book out on time is what builds more interest for the next book. Just like YouTube videos, this disposable media, I can make a series of YouTube videos and it doesn't cost me anything but time. But the fact that I continue to make videos, that's what makes a YouTube channel grow. It's not posting, one video once a year, or, if that, or whatever. So you can still get the same synergy with comics. Absolutely. We've seen it in web comics. Again, not for everybody. But again, I think this formula could work possibly for some creators, some producers. Okay, so I have some apprehensions. One factor is having enough capital to have a 3-issue head start. Another is shipping costs because you're shipping several times. Would that be a deal breaker? I don't know. I don't know. And let's not forget the risk and who will shoulder it. Continuing on. Even with a distributor, I don't believe monthly books make economic sense for the vast majority of indie titles. Absolutely think this is true. I think Getting titles from Dark Horse, even, that's a publisher most people have heard of. I think that most of their single issues are not making enough profit for people to actually make money. That's going to be my guess. I think that they're selling a lot more than even smaller publishers out there. I don't know, what is there, like Valiant or whatever? I don't know how many books they're actually selling, but you'd have to have so much in volume to make up for the price point. I don't believe that it actually makes sense. I believe that somebody's biting the bullet and they're really hoping that they make money in the long run as they release more books. They continue to be able to sell those in trade paperback form or in other ways. So it continued here. Someone is working for free or going into debt in order to put those books in the catalog. And for many small publishers, that's what you get is in the catalog. That's it. It doesn't mean you're getting sales. It doesn't mean comic shops are buying your books. Not at all. You still have to sell to each and every one of those comic book shops and hope that they can in turn sell your books to the public. Next one. I'm convinced comics are the greatest medium, but the story the numbers tell is that there are more people willing to make comics at a loss than there are readers willing to pay the real cost per issue. And I think that is absolutely true. Again, Marvel and DC are kind of exempt from this. Having said that, from numbers that have been released by DC, when they made all of their changes, we know that most of their titles were actually at a loss. And so who was shouldering that risk? Well, it's DC Comics. It's also Warner Brothers. It's all, they already are taking on the risk. AT&T, right? Is that who owns them now? They were taking on the risk. So on an indie comic basis, somebody has to be taking that risk. It's the publisher, it's whomever else, in order for you to fill out your line enough that you are making books and consistently putting them out on a short-term basis. All right. Yes, and absolutely there's never going to be a shortage of comic creators, but there always seems to be a shortage of comic book readers. And that's, you do anything you can to get to readers, but there's just not enough, never enough. So read comics. So continuing on here, this is why crowdfunding the collection first, then releasing single issues later makes the most sense, at least for me right now. Obviously that could change. Clearly the reason I posted this is because I've thought about how you could make this model work. So I'm thinking about it. But again, you'd have to make the numbers work. It's not just about passion. Like when you're talking about that kind of money, unless you're independently wealthy, you have to make the numbers work for there to be sustainable business. All right, next. Unless readers can make the jump to much more expensive single issues, I suspect most indie publishers should turn away from single issues. But let's face it, creators will just continue to work for little to no pay in hopes that one day they will become a name. All right, so now I've got a sound off here. Lots of people make comments again when you do a Twitter screed. I'm going to go with that, screed. And so got lots of great comments, actually. First one here, Peter Semetti. He says, the most important thing you're not mentioning is the marketing. I'm going to stop you there. I talk about marketing all the time, but this is about production. That's really the point here is about production and producing a book that quickly. I think for me, at least, I spend far more time marketing than I do producing. And so you're marketing an awful lot to just do one book a year, maybe two if you're lucky. Obviously not in Peter Semetti's case, but for me, that's how it has looked, and I think a lot of other creators. And so it's, I don't know, like, do the numbers work out? You still have to factor in how much time are you spending on live streams, how much time are you spending promoting it in order to get enough sales on a book to just make the book. Those hours don't get factored in. That is still working for free essentially, unless you've figured it out how the numbers to work. Again, all of this just varies wildly. And promotion plan to build up enough of a readership demand to justify a monthly release supply. Right. And of course, not, if it's your first comic book, making a monthly book, I don't know, that seems like a really bad idea. I think it's a really bad idea for me at the moment. But I think there are people out there that this could be could be a good idea for. But there still might be better ways to handle it. Your time would be better spent concentrating on growth strategies, not production output frequency. And I would just put a little nuance to that, growth is actually making more stuff. If you can't grow a lot when you only have one book. Putting out one book and then spreading it to tons and tons of people is great, but you got to be putting more books out. That's they're connected when it comes to growth. But yeah, really great comment, Peter. Put your comic out monthly on Patreon, like Ed Piscor. I read manga online from week to week and month to month. Then I get the trade when it comes out. This experience is much more enjoyable to the dedicated reader as opposed to binge reading the whole book. So yeah, this is the audience essentially that you're considering. There are people that want to read periodic releases of a title. So doing that online, having some kind of digital first method, it works for others. Ed Piscor apparently is his Red Room comic book that he does that way. It could absolutely work. There are people that do it, and that takes out the whole shipping process together, but you still have to produce that book. All right, next one here. Remember that cheap comics were mostly throwaway. They're not meant to make money to build a readership. The money making would come later, so you would have to sort of online readership, have a sort of online readership, and later do the printing. That way there's something to do while they wait. Yeah, which is nice. So same reason people want updates on Indiegogo campaigns. I mean, they want to know where the book is, but they want to be part of the process. They want to know what's happening. That's part of the entertainment, right? So maybe that is a good route to go. Release 2 pages at a time, perhaps. It'd be like a page turn each time. You get the page turn and see what's next. Obviously, you'd have to have all your lettering on board and sorted out first, but it's doable. Here's a comment from Mike Barron. People will gladly pay $10 for an outstanding comic, not for most direct though. Yeah, actually, I agree with that. I mean, just from my perspective, I would pay $10 for an issue of a comic that I really liked, especially if it had a great cover. I like having a good cover because at the least it's a piece of art that you can have. Omen Comics says comics cost a lot more to make than most people know. It can easily get up to $2,000 to $3,000 to make a single book, depending on prices and the length. But adding a page for ads on the printed version can help cut down the cost. Printers often give discounts for this. So yeah, $2,000 to $3,000 is kind of low. I mean, again, depending on how long your book is, I think, man, you could pay an awful lot more than that to produce a comic book. I mean, production, printing as well. I'm not even considering printing, but a lot of costs can get factored in there. When it comes to advertising, how much can you possibly charge an advertiser? That's another question. And how many ads do you put in a book? To make it work out would be great, but let's say you were charging a really high price for ads. Let's say we were charging $500 per ad in a comic book, and you could put 4. That seems like a lot of ads, like 4 full pages, $500 for each of those. That's $2,000. That would really, really help. I don't think I would be skeptical if those numbers could actually work. I think you'd be looking at more at a total of a couple $100 in people paying for ads. So I'm happy to be wrong there, though. I would love for that to be a really readily easy solution. All right, Aaron L says, I think 2 to 4 a year is a good sweet spot for most indie people. It gives creators the time to create and customers time to save up the money, especially if they usually go with the bigger tiers. Yeah, absolutely. You can't, this is part with crowdfunding too, is people get crowdfunder fatigue. I think that is absolutely a thing. I know I'll go through phases where I'm backing a lot and then I pull back and I'm not backing, for a month or so, because it just ends up being it just feels like a lot of money going out of the bank account, and you're not going to see those books for a long time. There's I don't know. There's a number of reasons why people get crowdfunding fatigue. So those asks have to be reasonable, which is why I think if you did a subscription model, you would do it once a year, or it's got to be really cheap. I don't know. Again, figuring out that sweet spot is important, but really good point. Why I wish I was an artist so much easier. I hear you. I hear you. It would make life easier and harder at the same time. You're not outsourcing it, but if you're a good, fast artist, man, you would sure save yourself a lot of trouble. If the comic industry would stop thinking it's above using ads, you could bring costs down. Not once in 50 years did I ever think ads took away from my reading experience. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem reading ads. I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, it's kind of charming sometimes. It always makes me think of older comic books. If I'm reading some 80s Daredevil or whatever, those are the most recent 80s books that I bought. Seeing those ads in those single issues is kind of fun. It's kind of charming. Again, doing that today, I mean, not a bad idea. Factoring that into a crowdfunding campaign and figuring out the right price point is another consideration. I agree wholeheartedly. I think about essentially making normal 22-page comic books, but waiting until 4 or 5 are finished and releasing as a trade graphic novel with some extra character sheets, concept sketches, etc. That might be able to sell for a higher cost and pay a livable wage. Yeah, that's always the goal, is a livable wage. I'm not even approaching like what would be a livable age with this model, but it would be at least, it would kind of hit the point of having monthly cash flow, money coming in and going out monthly on a regular basis that you could somewhat predict, which crowdfunding does not do well at. All right, so next comment here, my 2 cents, seeing $5.99 on a cover price for a monthly from a bigger publisher isn't uncommon. $10 isn't that far out there if it's quality controlled. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm on board with that perspective. 48 pages or so quarterly would be pretty cool. Quarterly, yes, and that's larger, but sooner. So working on that, again, you'd have to have the right artist. For me, I think, man, I could totally do Downcast twice a year if it wasn't for the cash flow issues. Like if it all relies on you doing the one crowdfunder in order to have the finances to complete the book and get it shipped out and everything. You got to ship it out before you can decide how much profit you have for the next book. So I hear what you're saying. Getting there, I think it would just take a little bit more capital, which is the same problem you'd have with the other books. This is very true. The economics are tough. What I've done so far is crowdfunded the books and fulfillment as swiftly as possible. Then reach out to local comic book shops to get on the shelves directly, as well as distributors through Comics Main. Didn't even know they did distribution. Very interesting. Okay, good way to think about it. I like your Downcast and Fatal. One thing though, Fatal's not out yet. I think you're gonna love it, but I can't wait for that book to get out. I don't see how the quality of the art and construction would work. Perhaps Alterna for monthly. Yeah, and that's somewhat the process that I have now. Alterna is not releasing monthly, and if they were, I wouldn't really be able to keep up with the pace at the moment. I could, again, if it would just take a lot of capital up front. Would you have to get a fulfillment service to ship the book? Sounds like a lot of moving parts. Also, $10 is a very fair price, in my opinion. What would be your primary way of selling it? And then that was Michael Bancroft. I said if I did, I'd ship it myself. This is all just speculation right now, just because I ship myself right now. Anytime you add more moving parts, though, there's more things that can go wrong. So if you have a fulfillment service that is really on the ball, then yeah, man, you could probably do it. Otherwise, it would get pretty rough. I think you would have to print locally, super local, and be able to really have a rhythm with the printer. So much can go wrong in printing. Let's see. It is the relatively low demand that keeps indie comics at a higher price. The only group I've seen that provides a great benefit for a lower cost is iconic comics. Yes, and I've talked about them quite a bit recently, and it is really interesting to see how their model is evolving. Uh, they aren't monthly titles, though. I said even still they aren't monthly titles. They do seem to be killing it, though. How many projects did you complete and fulfill in the last 12 months? This was to another creator. 2 this year with 10 more in development for next year. If you do 10 books next year, that is impressive. See, and I actually think you could do, you could think of it a little bit differently, like the image model, and do 6 to 8 issues a year, and you have sort of a hiatus, like a TV show. You have the off season, and I think that would be an interesting and totally fair route to go. And it would probably give you some time to catch up to make sure that you can release those. So it'd be like, hey, February's coming up. This is the beginning of our comic book season. That is issue 1 for this season. Comes out for 6 to 8 months straight, and then you're on hiatus again, and you sort of gear up for the next round of titles, or books rather. So yeah, could be interesting. Anyway, lots of stuff to think about, to talk about. I find this stuff really interesting. Am I going to change anything I'm doing? No, not really. Not at the moment. But I think it's important to think through. Why? Because I really have looked at the current state of comic books, or as it was 2 to 3 years ago, as a really important moment, and one to be seized, opportunities to be taken and to grow. And right now I'm kind of trying to think, man, have I really done what I should have done with that time? What have I built with that time? And all the interest, hyper interest, the state that crowdfunding was in, all of that jazz. What have I built in that time that I have to show for it? And I'm still asking myself that question. I'm clearly not over yet, but I think it's important to take those moments and consider it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate you for listening. Don't forget to check out the Downcast Gods and Gears crossover fun campaign. The link is in the description below, and I will see you in the next video.